Today's daf is daf Lamed Aleph, and we're up to Tana Kamed Rav Nachman. So the brises were taught in front of Rav Nachman, and in the brise it says, "Bisman shodem mitzaris aviv es imo." If a person causes anguish to his father or his mother, kavyochel Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yofa Asisi Shlo Darti Beineim. It's a good thing that I didn't dwell amongst them. Shel Moli Darti, had I dwelled amongst them, Beineim Tziaruni, they would have been mitzayer me as well. Omer Rabbi Yitzchak Kol Over Avera Baseisa Ki'ilu Dochek Ragli Ashchina. If a person violates a Torah law, then it's as if he pushed away the feet of the Shekhinah, so to speak, meaning that there's no Hashgachas HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that place, and God will not appear there, and God doesn't want to see up front how this person is violating an Avera. Shenemar Ko Amar Hashem Hashamayim Kis'i V'aretz Adom Ragloi. Pasuk in Yeshaya Samach Vav, that my Shekhinah, God declares, is everywhere. It's in Shamayim and it's Aretz. But this person who hides himself when he commits a violation doesn't want to be seen. And it's as if he's pushing away the feet of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he's saying, you know what, God is not here. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Asal Yodim She'alech Arba Amos becomes Kufa. A person should not walk in a way of gaiva for Amos. Shenemar, it says with regard to Kadosh Baruch Hu there in Yeshayahu, Novi Moloch ala Oretz Kvodo. So if somebody's walking becomes Kufa, it's as if he's being dochek the Ragli Ashchin, and he's saying, you know what, God is not here. Rav Huna Breid Rabbi Yeshua lo Mesagi, he wouldn't walk. Arba Amos begili rosh, without covering his head. Ki Omar, he declared Shechina l'mala miroshi. It's not appropriate for a person to stand begili rosh in front of the Shechina. Shol ben almona achas. So we're talking about a person who was orphaned on from his father, and he asked Rabbi Eliezer, Abba Omer Ashkeni Mayim, ve'imo Omeres Ashkeni Mayim, Ezemem Kodem. So we now have a priority issue regarding the mitzvah of kibbud avim. Who gets priority, the mother or the father? Malay, hanach kvod imcha. Put the kavod of your mother on the side for a moment. Vasei, and first get involved in kvod avicha. Why? Shata v'imecha chayovim b'kvod avicha. If you and your mother both have a chiyuv kavod vis-a-vis your father, her husband, then he comes first. Now, this man goes ahead, Ubolifnei Rabbi Yeshua, and he reiterates the same question that he asked Rabbi Eliezer to Rabbi Yeshua. Omelokach. Rabbi Yeshua repeated the same logic of Rabbi Eliezer, that Kibbud Av comes first and comes prior to Kibbud Em Omelo. And the Yosam, who doesn't have a father, continued and asked Rebbe, Nisgar Shama, what happens if his parents are divorced? Amalei, Rabbi Yeshua responded, Mibein Risei Necha, from the saros, the hairs that are on your eyelashes, Nikar Sheben Almonata. We see that you are the son of a widow because you have been crying so much over the loss of your father that the eyelashes have fallen off, basically. And therefore, you're not asking this question in order to fulfill it halacha l'maisa because you don't have a mother and a father. But you're interested in just plain limud, to understand the halacha for the sake of understanding the halacha. And therefore, the answer to your question is that you should be mechabed both of them, shava b'shava, and there's no priority of one covered over the other. And therefore, hatel lahem mayim b'seifel. Take water in some sort of a receptacle, v'kaka lahem ketarnagolim, and make a cockle-doodle-doo sound so that they'll come to drink. In other words, leave it in front of them, and they'll, on their own, decide who gets there first. Dorash Ula Rabba Ura Hagodol. Apischa de Benesi on the Pesach Beis Hanasi. My Siv, what does the Pasuk until it mean? Yoducha Hashem Kol Malchei Oretz Ki Shamu Imre Ficha. Let's be medayik in the Pasuk. Mamar Picha Lo Nemar. It doesn't say Mamar Picha, but rather it says Imre Picha. And Mamar Picha is in Lashon Yachid, in the singular, whereas Imre Picha is in the plural, the grammatical plural. And it implies that only after he hears, only after the Malchei Umos hear the great things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wrought, then they will give praise. And it could mean that they changed their mind. So echad li'achar sheshamu malchei ha'umos dvarim rabim hodu Hashem al dvar. When they heard so many things, they expressed their thanks to Hashem. And initially they weren't interested, but now they became interested in singing the praises of Hashem. So that's not the pshat in Imrei Ficha, but rather B'shash Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu Anochi V'lo Yelecha Amru Umas Ha'olam L'Kvod Atzmo Hu Dorish. God is interested in His own glory. V'kevan shenemar Kaved es Avich V'asimecha Chazru V'hodu L'Mamaros Rishonos. If a man is obligated to be mechabed his father and his mother, how much more so is he obligated to be mechabed HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Because God is a partner in the creation of man, and life and death are in the hands of God. So therefore, we're going to interpret the pasuk, Kol Malchei Eretz Ki Shamu Imrei Ficha. What did they hear? They heard the rest of the dibros, including Kabed es Avich V'asimecha. So when they first heard on Nochi and Lo Yelcha, they thought, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you know what? L'kvod atzmo dorish. But then when they heard the balance of the Aseret Dibros with the special emphasis on Kaved es Avich V'asimecha, they understood that God is truth and is the great God, not interested in his own covenant. Rav Amar Mihocha. Rav says that I have a different source, in this case a pasuk in Tehillim as well, but to prove and derive the conclusion that because of the later dibros, therefore the Umas HaOlam were modeh to Hashem. Rosh Devarcha Emes. Now, what does that mean, Rosh Devarcha? I mean, only Rosh Devarcha Emes, Lo Sof Dvarecha? Ella, but rather what the pasuk has in mind is Misof Dvarecha Nikar Sherosh Dvarecha Emes. From the conclusion, and in this case it means Kabed es Avicha, that is going to prove that the beginning of the dibros, the first dibros, are truth. How far do you have to go with the mitzvah of being mishtal b'mitzvahs kibbud av v'eim amallah? So Rav Ula responded to them. To very famous Gemara, Ma'asa ovikol mech bi'ashkel v'dom v'nesinish Moshe pamachas bikshu chachamim pragmatia b'shishim ribu sachar v'yamavteach munach tachas merashosef shel aviv v'lo tziaro. So the Chacham wanted to buy some sort of piece of merchandise, some schora, and it was worth 600,000 dinrei zav. But in order to get access to the schora, they would have to wake up the father because he would have the key, the mafteah. Rabbi Yehuda Mishmuel. Sholues Rabbi Eliezer at Heichon Kibbud Avim Alem Tzurima Osov Kokavechalo V'Ashkel Dov Ben Esinishmo Picture Bimeru Chacham Avonim Leif B'Shishim Ribu Schar V'Rav Kahana Masni B'Shmonim Ribu Schar V'Hoyam Avteach Munach Tachas Marshos Shel Avlo Tziaro Shana Cheres Nosla HaKadosh Baruch Hu Schar Shenoldu Lo Paraduma Bi Edro Nichnusu chakra Yisrael etzlo Omer lehem yodea ani bochem she'im ani mevakish mikol moment sheba olam atem nesnim lo ela ani mevakish b'chem ela oso momon shefsadeti b'shvil kvod Abba. When I was machabed him and I wouldn't wake him up, even though it meant that he had the key to open up and get access to the schayra that we would sell for 600 ribu. So Kadosh Baruch Hu gave him a reward that he would now have a paradum in his Eider, and the Chacham would pay, sky's the limit to buy the paraduma, but he said, you know what, let me just ask you for the amount of money that I lost when I could have invested in schayra. Or let me be more precise about it, I could have sold you avanim le'efa. Amar Rabbi Chanina, in the case of a guy who's not even obligated in the mitzvah kibbut ava'en kach, yet he will receive so much schar. Is mitzvah v'yos halachas kam v'kama? How much more so a Jew who's obligated in the mitzvah kibbut ava'en? How much schar will he receive? And some have the girsa here, the Amar Rabbi Chanina Gadol hamitzuva v'yoseh Yosef Mimisha Eina Mitzvah v'yoseh. Amar Rabbi Yosef Bereish. Originally, before I found and heard the words of Rabbi Chanina about Gadol hamitzuva v'yoseh, Havamina used to say, Man dahava Amarli. Anyone who would tell me that halacha is kir Rabbi Yehuda, Tiyomar Suma Potamina Mitzvahs, Avidna Yoma Tovel Rabbanan. I will make a great suda for the Talmidei Chachamim because I'm so happy. Dolo Mifkedei V'Ha'avidna, because I was not mitzvah and yet I was Mekayim the mitzvahs because Rabbi Yosef was blind. Is Afal Pichen Ani Mekaymon. And Lefichos Chari Rav Yosef, I'm doing it on a voluntary basis. I'll get even more schar. And I was willing to make a party to celebrate the fact that according to Rabbi Yehuda, we pass like Rabbi Yehuda that Suma Potamina mitzvahs. But Hashta the Shmisei Lahad. Now I heard the Omer Rabbi Chanina Gadol Mitzvah Yosef and Mimisha Eina Mitzvah Yosef is Adar Man the Holy the Ein Alochik Rabbi Yehuda Vidna Yom Tov Rabban. I'll celebrate if you told me we don't pass like Rabbi Yehuda, but rather assume it's Chayav in mitzvahs. That would be great news. Ki also Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi came from Eretz to Bava Lama, Pamachas Haya, one time Dominicina was lavish Sirkon Shalza. He was wearing what we call big day meshi, silk, expensive garments. Vayoshe ben Gedoli Romi, he was sitting amongst the greats of Rome. Ubasa Imo, his mother showed up. Ukarato mimenu. V'tafkalo al rosho, v'yarkalo b'fanav lo chalima. His kibbutz was so great, this Dama ben Esina, that even though his mother, while he was sitting amongst the greats, and he was wearing zav, he was wearing gold, she came and she ripped it off him and hit him over the head, spit in front of him, and he did not indicate that he was sad about it. Lo echlimo, he didn't try to embarrass her and say, "Mom, what are you doing to me? I'm sitting here with the Yoshman Kedoli Romi." Tani Avimi Bereid Rav Abba Yesh Machalov Pisyoni Vitardo Min Olam Yesh Matchino Berei Chayim Umevio L'Chay Olam Haba. So Rashi here quotes Yerushalmi to explain this Gemara, that if a person can feed his father the best, most expensive veal, and yet the father turns to him and says to him, "Well, where'd you get the money for this?" And he says, Dad, just chew away. Don't bother me with questions. That's Tordem and Olam. He's going to be removed and punished from this world. And then there's someone who gives his father the mill to work the mill, which is a very difficult, tedious work. And yet it brings him L'olam haba. Why? Because the son was called for military service. He was conscripted into the army. And there's nobody there to work the mill and to support the family. So this young fellow asks his father to take over the mill.